Chapter 8, Nucleotides and Nucleic Acids. Now, you've heard of nucleotides, okay? These are the bases, we saw the DNA bases, the RNA bases. The thing is, nucleotides are more than just DNA or more than just messenger RNA. They are part of some metabolic functions. They are either an intermediate product, an intermediate step. They feed into a process, they feed out of a process. They may actually be part of a cell signaling process. Think cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP. And yes, granted, as the bullet here shows, they are primarily that we know of, that we focus on, DNA or RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, ribonucleic acid. The nucleic acids, DNA or RNA, when they are put together, they're strung together, the AGCTs of DNA, the AGCUs of RNA. They're a repository for information. A repository of information on how to make a polypeptide. They are literally the blueprint. And a blueprint is the steps on how to make something. Well, that's what our nucleic acids are here. When we look at DNA, we look at RNA. They are the repositories on how to make stuff. They're how things can be stored. But it doesn't really do much good if this, repository is a one and done thing. So somehow this collection of blueprints, every polypeptide, whether it's going to be an enzyme or a structural protein in your body, has its own gene, its own blueprint. This collection of blueprints, that's your chromosomes. For us eukaryotes, us prokaryotes, us cellular organisms, DNA is our nucleic acid of choice. But it's not always DNA out there in the natural world. For all things that we consider to be living cells, yes, that's what it is. But we have to take into account viruses. Viruses, they can use RNA, depending upon which virus species you're referring to. DNA is not immutable, okay? It can be altered. The chromosomes can take damage. This damage, this change in the structures can result in a change in the sequence, a misstatement in the blueprint. Well, that misstatement can be silent, it could be beneficial, or it could be detrimental. The difference between me and you as you're watching this and our chromosomes. We have all the same genes, but they're not the same AGCT sequence within those genes. It's because of, thousands of years of different family lineages, those mutations accumulate. These little damages accumulate. What was an AGC is now an ACC sequence, and it just accumulates. Every generation or so, you get a little bit more and a little bit more. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just how evolution works. So a little bit of damage in me, well, okay, fine, I end up with cancer or something like that. As long as it doesn't happen in the sperm cells, it's just going to die with me. But if it happens in the sperm cells or egg cells, depending upon whether you're a sperm maker or an egg maker, then it gets passed on to progeny. Okay, that's when adaptation and evolution kick in. We are, well, I was going to say slowly, in the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, it was a slow progression of us coming up with new mechanisms, new ways of examining nucleic acids, of examining DNA. But within the past couple of decades, we seem to be moving faster and faster as we come up with new technologies, new computer-based systems that can analyze the data quicker, faster, more efficiently. So we are figuring out everything. Got to remember, it wasn't until like just around the turn of the century that we had sequenced the first human being. We didn't know everything there, we just sequenced it. It took a lot of computing power to do that, to sequence, come up with the entire genome. Didn't know what all of it was, didn't know what all of it did, but it was there. As we are getting better and better, here we are 2 decades later. You know, if you got enough money, you can pay to have your own self sequenced. And those computers they're going to be using aren't anything bigger, badder than, some of the desktop computers you have at home that you play video games on. The triphosphates. Yes, you know ATP. Okay, ATP triphosphate. That is our energy source of choice within many cellular reactions, metabolic reactions. But if there's ATP, you got to remember there's also going to be GTP, CTP, TTP, and UTP. All of our nucleotides will form a triphosphate. Just for whatever evolutionary reason, ATP became predominant.